Recently on YouTube, there has been an uprise of videos regarding tribalism. I've seen Foros talk about it, I've seen Sourceless talk about it, and I'm sure there are many other content creators that talk about it. So today I want to talk about my own take regarding all this tribalism and all this drama. Now, I just want to say that I do confess I am putting myself into this because when I try to make videos without any rage bait or hate bait titles, naturally the algorithm kind of just deflates my views. When I first made the Genshin Sucks video, it was my best performing video of all time. When Gacha Goblin went to react to my rage video on Love and Dead Space, that was also my second best performing video, I guess, even though it was unfounded. And I just want to say that Salvestus is right when she mentioned that there are content creators that fall into this circle where they make these hyperbole titles and stuff like that. To be honest, I did want to talk about this issue like weeks before. I just didn't really have the courage and the time to just sit down and talk about it. But since I do have the time today, I want to talk about it. Now, I saw Stix's video on how Black Beacon is losing money, and I also saw videos on how Genshin Wuthering Waves are going to EOS because they lack money, and it's just ridiculous that some people believe that Black Beacon is dying because they do not have a Japanese dub, which I really think that it's a false narrative. There are games with Japanese dubs and amazing voice actors at that, and they still eventually died out. One of the prominent examples I can give is Love Live School Idol Festival. Love Live School Idol Festival is one of the idol anime in the industry since 10 years ago. When I was a teenager, Love Live was like the peak for me. I love Live, and I watched it evolve from Muse to Aquas to Nijisaki High School, and I've seen how Love Live changed. I played since the first Nico summer event together with the Kotori SR. And sadly, after 10 years, they announced their end of service. Why am I bringing this example up? Because Love Live, despite having multiple servers, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, English, they still end of service. And there are other servers like Chinese, global, they are all voiced in Japanese. Love Live never had people voicing in English, Korean in their game, except for their anime. Their anime does have an English dub, but it's not applied into the game. Thankfully, since the voice acting honestly wasn't that good back then for the English dub. So to say that Black Beacon is going to fail or is failing because there's a lack of Japanese dub, I really think that that's not a fair take. A lot of the games that are popular in Japanese, that have Japanese dub that are popular, is not just attributed to the Japanese dub. There are also individuals that prefer the Chinese, English, and Korean dubs, and to attribute every single successful game to Japanese is honestly being discriminatory towards the other voice actors that are good and trying their best in voice acting. I could give some examples. Genshin Impact, one of the best voice actors in Korean, the character is Kazuha. Kazuha sounds amazing in all languages. And I think to just boil down like, oh, people play this game only because Kazuha's voice actor is this very popular Japanese actor is undermining the work of other voice actors. Furthermore, I really do think that Japanese voice actors have this issue of speaking in a fake voice, while many other voice actors in other languages are able to speak in their normal voice, their tone, and still able to portray their emotions. Recently I've tried watching Taiwanese drama in the original dialect that it's supposed to be, and it was surprisingly good. It wasn't even in the conventional Korean or Japanese or Chinese that I usually listen to, but I was able to appreciate the way how they scream and shouted from their heart, you know. The sad thing about these anime is that these voice actors are always forced to speak in this high pitched voice to be appealing. And I will be real, I'm glad that Black Beacon doesn't have these annoying high pitched voices because it's not really good for the vocal cords. Now I get it. People will say that it is impressive for voice actors to display their vocal range, you know, being able to change from your normal voice to a high pitched voice to a mature low tone voice does show the versatility in your abilities. However, I do think that it is also limiting. Let me give an example from Love Life again. You know, Love Life, Emi Nata, I'll just use her as an example. Emi Nata has a natural Japanese voice. And when she sings in that natural Japanese voice, she actually sounds good. And you can tell that when she is singing with the rest of the group, she's intentionally going this high pitched voice to sound appealing. And what is more disturbing to me is that there are voice actors like the Ruby Kurosawa one from Ice Cream intentionally going high pitched, not because they want to resonate with children, but with grown men that are attracted to such voices. And you know it because the audience for all these ice cream live streams and all that, they aren't children. Yeah, sure, there are children inside there, but they're mostly grown men. And it's just disturbing for a grown woman to go high pitched for a minor character. You know, I would be perfectly fine if Ruby Kurosawa was actually aged up when she sang Ice Cream, but I don't believe that there's any biography that shows that Ruby has aged up by the end of Love Life. This is majorly contrasted with Yes Go Go, which actually had the animation studio fund them to write an anime when they are adults. You know, I would be fine if the characters, even after they are adults, have a high pitched voice because there are people that are born with higher pitched voices. And I think that's nothing wrong with that. However, I do think that it is very bothersome for people to intentionally speak in a high pitched tone when it can sound the same in the actual tone. And I also think that it's really insulting because I've heard Japanese children speak before and they sound nothing like that. I've heard real life Japanese people speak on the street and they sound nothing like that. They sound just like us regular people speaking, and their intonation, their voices, their words are still really nice to listen to. So for people to be like, oh, Black Beacon is failing because there's no Japanese dub, it's almost like they're entrapping themselves in this bubble, you know, like this bubble of failure that is just related to voice acting. Now, don't get me wrong. Good voice acting is essential for people to get into the character. After all, when you look at a character with pink hair, blue dress, you expect them to have a more cheerful vibe, you know, and when they sound like they are dead or the voices just don't match the character, it turns people off. And I think that's why so many people are against English dub, you know, for the longest time. Because when you listen to the original Japanese language, that's so much more pronounced, well articulated. The characters' lip sync is perfect. When you listen to the English, you will naturally be like, hey, why do they sound like that? The same way how people are turned off when they hear like Korean actors having like Chinese dub overs. You know, I've tried to watch, as I mentioned before, I tried to watch the Taiwanese dramas in their original dialect, and it makes such a huge difference. You know, it's like how watching Squid Game dub versus the original language. You will definitely have a different experience. That's not to say that people who enjoy English dub are invalid. I just think that it is fair to say that there are some dubs that can be better, they can improve, you know. And let's be real, not everyone is born with a voice that's pleasant to listen to and that's out of their control. However, the problem I have with all this Japanese dub is that they are not changing their tone because they are born with a naturally unpleasant voice that's just really hard to listen to. It's more like because they're trying to appeal to the public that likes such things, and they are not children. I will be fine if characters like Klee and Paimon are voiced by actual children with high pitched voices, because children before puberty, their voices tend to be higher, whether they're males or females. So having a children to voice act that out, I think it's completely fine. If anything, it's probably the most authentic way to go about it. So why am I talking so much about voice acting, children, voice acting? It's because I really want to talk about the nuance in voice acting and not just attribute, a failure of a game to their lack of Japanese dub. As mentioned before, Love Life is just one example. There could be many other Japanese games with perfectly well done Japanese dub that still didn't make it to the market. And that brings me to the next point, which is about how Wuthering Waves needed to improve in their story. Now, I was guilty as charged when people say that I didn't spend the amount of time that I need, to really understand Wuthering Waves. I didn't play Wuthering Waves I as it is intended, the way how I played Genshin. When I first played Genshin, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know what ley lines were. I didn't know what wishing was. I didn't really understand what primal gems were. I just went around collecting mints and berries and just enjoyed listening to the sound. I had no idea how to build characters until I see other people flexing on me. And eventually I tried to save up for the 5 stars, and today I have at least 10 5 stars in my account. So naturally, if you compare my AR60 account that I've been playing for at least 1 year, um, to subtract off all the gaps that the breaks that I've taken, you would say that my comparison between Wuthering Waves and Genshin isn't actually fair, and I will acknowledge that. So, after knowing all this unfairness for not treating the game equally, I tried to give Wuthering Waves one last chance, and it did work on my mobile. I managed to download it on my mobile. I was able to play it, and I just have to say that Wuthering Waves is only good because of 2.0. I tried to play without skipping. I had the skip button. I was really tempted. I did skip a few times, but I was like, you know what? I'm just not gonna skip through the story. I'm gonna play it like how I'm forced to play Genshin without the skip button. And I just have to say that it was really sufferable. Like, the story was so slow. The initial modelings, they are just kind of like standing there. They also had the static poses. Yeah, sure, their model was more expressive compared to Genshin, definitely even during 1.0. And there are the grappling, the running on walls that really gave it an edge above Genshin. But the way the jumping, the way the architecture is created in Huanglong, it really just turns me off. There is a part of Huanglong that is more beautiful, which is it's actually the part where Jiyan appeared. I believe it is the chapter 1, part 5 or 6, where Jian appears, and then he teaches us about the formation, and then we get to fight. I felt like that was actually the best part of the quest. I haven't seen the part where Jinshi goes up and fight Jue, which I've seen other content creators say it's really good, but I tried to play it through and it was really painful. Jian was the only reason why I was able to just like force my way through, honestly, because without Jian, it's just us talking to Encore and Alto. And sure, maybe it's just the English voice acting that throws me off, but it was just so slow paced. I played Genshin from Mondstadt all the way to Sumeru, and as dreadful and painful as that was, and I don't want to experience again because of the lack of a skip button, I still had a rather pleasant experience when I played Mondstadt, alright? Like, if you want to compare Mondstadt to, like, the 1.0 Wuthering Waves, I'm sorry to say this, but Genshin really has an edge over. The way how we see Zavalian talking to Venti, the way how they animated Amber in the wind and us saving them. I would go back for the nostalgia, just not for Paimon yapping. If 1.0 Genshin didn't have Paimon yapping, I think it would be better. In fact, I think that Genshin's storytelling would be better if Paimon wasn't there. And I can really understand why content creators like Bran Online is saying that Genshin's lore is good. It's just the story presentation is not as well, and Wuthering Waves is not quite there yet. I kind of empathize with that because 1.0 Wuthering Waves, like the whole 1.0 patch of Wuthering Waves, feels like they are trying to copy Genshin. It's kind of like how in the beginning, Aquas, they're just trying their best to emulate their ancestor, Basically, Love Life Aquas. Aquas is a next generation from Muse, and they know about how good Muse is, and they're just trying their best to be like Muse, even though that's not themselves, they are trying to be Muse. And I feel like that's the vibe that Wuthering Waves is giving me. Like Verena feels like a budget version of Nahida, to put it bluntly, and Yang Yang just kind of feels like a darker colored version of Ayaka. The main rover just feels like the traveler who's lost his memories, and then you have to help him find back. I mean, they did remove the sibling element, which made it more unique. But the fact that the first region is kind of like a mix of Tsumeru Island, Liyue, Luofu, it kind of feels like a mess. In fact, I would even argue and say that Tower of Fantasy's Memoria is better written than Huanglong, because at the very least in Tower of Fantasy, even if the first region is kind of ugly and not aesthetically pleasing, Memoria offered something that's not in Genshin and not in the other games. Back then Honkai Star Rail hasn't appeared yet. So for the Tower of Fantasy devs to be able to create Memoria that's just drastically different from Genshin, with their elevators, their first person perspective car movements, a lean model on inside the game itself. You can pet dogs, sleep, I think that at least Tower of Fantasy, even with its clunky interface, still try to break away from the mold. Now you can say that, oh, it's because they are different from Genshin, but you can tell that they are inspired by Genshin, right? It's pretty obvious that they kind of are inspired by Genshin, since it is a big title and it's natural for successors to emulate whatever's in the big title. And I think that's why Rina Sita is such a why it's such a breaking point for Wuthering Waves, because it's like they finally realized that, hey, us just simply copying Genshin isn't going to sustain us, and so we're going to do something different. Of course, it is not said in an obvious way, but you can tell, And I just kind of hope that Wuthering Waves wouldn't just be trying to improve from Genshin's mistakes, or like Honkai Star Rail's mistakes, because as much as I like the new region Samtimont, it just kind of feels like an improvement from Natlan. It's like Wuthering Wave devs, they know people hate Natlan. So they came up with Augustus. They know people are annoyed with the storytelling in Amphorius. So they made a world and characters based on that and then sell them as it is. So it's still kind of like how Love Life tries to come up. Like, it's like kind of how, imagine if Aquas made a sad song because Muse's sad song is successful, or if a successor of Blackpink is trying to wear the same clothes but just less skimpy, so that fans will be more appealed. That's the vibe I'm getting from Wuthering Waves, and I feel like they had to improve, because if they didn't, the game wouldn't last. Just like the way how Black Beacon isn't really lasting because like they're not fixing the customers' issues. They're not listening to feedback. And now that brings me to my final point, which is, are we taking this game's lack of innovation, lack of quality of life improvement a bit too seriously. I've been attending courses because I am currently working in the medical field, and I can understand why it is paramount for healthcare professionals or any other settings to have a high quality service. For example, you wouldn't want your airplane to have one missing screw, or one of the wings are broken, or sleeping in a hospital bed that is dirty and the bitches are torn, broken. But then when it comes to gaming, is it really that serious if a game is not doing that well? I feel like a lot of CCs are looking, I mean, it could be the minority, but the algorithm makes it seems like a lot of CCs are focused on gacha revenue, which honestly I don't think is the most important thing. Now, don't get me wrong, as a business, they definitely would have to make profits. That's needless to say. But if a game is not doing that well, you know, is it really that serious? For me, the reason why I quit Genshin is not because, like, oh, the banner sales are not doing that well, or like, oh, people are leaving because the end game is so bad, and the power creep is so bad. I don't think that power creep, or like or not being able to clear end game is that serious. I'm not saying that it's not serious. I just don't think it's that serious because, let's be real, if you do not want to clear the end game, you don't have to. You don't have to. Yeah, I know people will say that, but kid, if I don't clear the end game, I wouldn't get prima gems to wish for my favorite characters. Are you saying that I don't have to build the characters, blah blah blah? I'm not saying that. Okay, you can absolutely build characters for your end game, but I just don't think that that's the most important thing. In fact, I just think that it's more important for the gacha games to be consistent. Like the reason why I just left Genshin is because the trailer is one thing, and then the story is another, and they probably realized that because NFR story feels slightly better. The 5.7 hour conquest feels slightly better. So yeah. Adding to that, I just want to reinforce the fact that no matter how much quality of life is provided in these games, at the end of the day, they are still a gacha game. They still want you to gamble for the characters and not improve their services so that you would have a more pleasant life to live. This is different from airplanes ensuring that the flight is safe, and food and beverages stores ensuring that food safety is adhered to, or like amenity facilities ensuring that their amenities management ensuring that their toilets are clean so that you don't see roaches running around, that kind of thing. Like these gacha games improving uh is comparable to a casino offering a better deal at a lower price, but at the end of the day they just want your money. After I get Furlover on my account, the experience was honestly so different. And it really made me realize how much they needed to improve their gameplay. It's kind of like how last time Genshin, people feel that Jean, Klee, they are really clunky to play. And when Yanfei and all the other characters like Kazuha are out, it provided such a different experience. And I think the same thing is happening in Wuthering Waves. I don't think that people should act as if Wuthering Waves improvement is so insane when they desperately needed it. It's just like how some gacha gamers have actually pointed out that you will realize that these games put in more effort when they are not having that revenue. And we need to remember that Black Beacon is actually a game created by ex Kuro devs. So maybe there is some internal system issue that's avoiding them from improving the game. But at the very least, even with their low banner sales, they are still going on. I think that's the most important thing. Like their new character is beautiful. I love her animations and I am having fun. I just don't think that it's very profitable for us to be like, oh my goodness, this game sucks, this game is better, like this tribalism isn't just affecting communities and game experience. I do think that it's putting too much emphasis, on the fact that, like, oh, you have to stay in this game or you are missing out. It is still perpetuating the fear of missing out and kind of like forcing people to play the game. Like, don't get me wrong, I can see why people are so excited for Samtimons. I can see why people are so excited for Nordcry. But as I mentioned before in my previous video about Genshin's design, the gacha games, they are just there at the end of the day to they want your money. And every improvement is just to get more of your money, not to give you a pleasant experience because they want you to. I think that some other content creators, which I don't really know the names, so they are right when they say that, this people are so happy with Wuthering Waves are providing slops, even though it's still at the end of the day, it's just a gacha game. I remember reading the comments. Sorry, it's not a content creator that said it. It was a comment that I read, and I guess that's why I just kind of want to dissociate myself from these games. Like, their stories are good, their character designs are good, but I just don't feel that it's good to keep funding these gacha games that trap you in this cycle of constantly wishing, constantly seeing what's the latest games and stuff. So, as always, my call to action would be, do you really want to provide your money for these games that just want you to gamble your money away, and when they end of service, your money is just gone like that? You know, just a food for thought, and I'll see you in the next video. Do let me know what you think. I'd love to see what you think and leave it down in the comments below. So that's all I have for you, and bye bye.